What's up, y'all? It's your girl Stacy the Intuitive back with another video. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now, if you've been watching my videos for a while, the title of this video may shock you quite a bit, especially given all the content that I've made, over the past few months or whatever. But there is a very good story going along with what I'm going to tell you guys here today. And I think it might really help anyone who has found themselves kind of in a similar space as I'm about to describe. So I think I should just get into it so it can make a little bit more sense. So very recently, I kind of had a moment of realization where I was just kind of questioning who I was, right? I honestly went through a solid day and it was kind of building up. This energy was building up in me quite a bit. I was experiencing a little bit of tension with God, a little bit of tension with the divine and stuff like that in my relationship that I'm building with the divine. And it reached a precipice, and it reached a day where I was kind of like at a breaking point with my spiritual journey and stuff like that. And I honestly just made the decision to kind of abandon it altogether. Not only my spiritual journey, but honestly, like my connection to God, everything. It's just like I had a day where I reached a precipice because I've just been working through this so much, having so much trust, blah, 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 stuff like that. And it just reached a precipice because there was just a lot of energy kind of building up. Kind of like that analogy, like if you shake a pop can, it's like so much pressure. It just has to explode. So that's kind of what I was experiencing, right? And that day was kind of like an identity shock for me. I'm gonna quickly spoil it for you guys. Obviously, I came back to my divinity and things like that, but there is a whole overarching story that I want to tell you guys that's very important to why I'm no longer claiming spirituality overall. So anyway, I had kind of come to this point where I was just ready to abandon it all. I was having a little bit of a moment with God. I was having a little bit of a butting of heads with God, I feel. And so in that day, though, it was of the utmost importance, as it always is, even in those moments. And even that brought me even closer to the divine. So obviously a very beautiful happening. But in those moments where I kind of was wanting to abandon like the spiritual journey and stuff like that, I began questioning, like, who am I then outside of this spiritual journey? Like, if I'm not a person who's on a spiritual journey, then who am I? And that kind of brought me even more frustration because I'm like, so I've been walking this path and I've been attached to this notion of being on a spiritual journey, and I have no idea who I am when I abandon that. And there's nothing really wrong with that, because when you think about it, like, we come from source, we are created by our creator. There's nothing wrong with the root, the core of you being divinity. But there is something wrong when you define yourself as a person who is on a spiritual path rather than just a person who is innately divine by divine creation. And that's kind of the conclusion that I came to, where I was clinging more to the fact that I'm on a spiritual path and really just identifying with the fact that I'm on a spiritual path rather than the fact that I'm a divine being and anything that I do is going to be divine. Anything that I embark on is of divinity because of my inherent nature, not because I've decided to walk a path, not because I've decided that my path is spiritual. It's just as it is. And I feel like I was kind of confining myself to how I'm supposed to show up, how I'm supposed to be in this life, just because of the fact that I saw myself as on a spiritual journey, on a spiritual path. And I began asking myself, like, what even is like spirit? What is spiritual, right? Is it anything more than just a notion to group ourselves in a different connotation than we would religion? Like, it's kind of the same thing as like asserting that we are religious, but it's a different energy to it. For me, that whole like really needing to cling to being spiritual became less resonant, and I felt more in alignment with just feeling divine because I come from source. I felt like my path became more about the path rather than the experience of life of being a divine being here on earth. And that's where things were getting a little bit muggled up. That's where, trust was getting a little bit muggled up. That's where my connection to the divine was getting more muggled up, because it was beginning to feel like, okay, I'm doing all the right things. Why are you not responding in the right ways? And that's where I got a little bit of that. I'm ready to abandon this because I feel like I'm compromising the self in trying to be on this path. But God was just trying to communicate to me, well, if you've made yourself the path, then there's nothing that I can do. But if you understand that you navigating in your most authentic way, each and every day, whatever you do is of divinity, whether it be that you're just sitting here drinking water, it is divine. It is of a divine path. then I can help you. But I cannot help you if you're thinking, oh, I need to be doing this in order to be spiritual, and this is what's spiritual. You know what I mean? Like, it was just becoming of that notion. I even started to feel like at the end of this, when I was coming out of this, like, I just feel like everything of this spiritual path has been very methodical, and I'm not a methodical person by any means. I am very intuitive. I am very free flowing. I mean, there is a time for like methodized ways of doing things, but for me, I really just like to flow with like what comes out, what's authentic, what's, you know, what's just innate to me, what's inherent to me, what feels right for me. So even as I'm kind of like going through these notions of being like, oh, this is how you manifest. Oh, this is how you know, call this into your life. This is how you become magnetic. It's like I was seeing so much of that propaganda kind of this spiritual path, and it just started to feel so unresonant. I just felt like people were so like consumed, including me, in those methodized ways, in those how-tos, in those, you know, just strict connotations of how to be spiritual, when the truth of the matter is, the only thing to make you spiritual is to realize your inherent divinity, and anything you do can become spiritual. And I'm saying spiritual because I'm not using that word anymore, really. I might use it for terms of like, you know, describing or just relatedness, but I really just feel more in alignment with the term divinity, and they probably really have the same meaning to a lot of people. The words are probably interchangeable, but for me, making that conscious switch to divinity and having the divinity aspect be reflective of just the fact that I come from the creator of all things just felt more resonant. So yeah, that's why I kind of was like, you know what? I'm abandoning the spiritual path. I'm no longer walking a path. I'm literally just being and enjoying and showing up as my divine self in this existence. I'm not doing anything to be spiritual. I'm not walking any path, because the path is something that just happens. It just unfolds. And I feel like the fact that I was being very single track minded and I'm walking this path, it was just kind of like limiting me in all the places that I could be, in all the existences that I could conjure up, in all the different modes of authenticity that could emerge from me. And so in doing that, I found that my relationship with God has deepened to like the highest degree. And that's one of the most beautiful things about this path, is like I was able to have total transparency with God, right? It wasn't about how I should be showing up, and it wasn't about how God should be showing up to me. In my mind, like, you know, the day I had a full day where I just had completely written off all spiritual things, all of honestly like my connection to God. I wasn't consciously trying to connect to it. I had written all of those things off for a full 24 hours, y'all. And I mean, it was just so beautiful when it came back, because the day before I had kind of a moment with God where I was like, you know, God just shows up in such subtle ways. And the way that I came back to, you know, just center, back to reconnection, even though I was never truly disconnected, was just so subtle. And I had a feeling that that this was purpose, but it was very important for me to have this moment of disconnection, because it made me realize how deeply I was clinging to this identity of being a spiritual being. And that was just so wrong, because I feel like it kind of separated me from the whole creation. And just anyone who identifies with the spiritual path in that way, I feel that you might be separating yourself from the beauty of the entirety, the union of all. And when I just decided to understand that we are all literally divine, because we are all coming from the same source and we're here on earth and stuff like that, then it was just able to make me feel more connected to this earth existence, and it was able to make me feel more connected to my creator and stuff like that. And it also just allows me to have this very free-flowing energy about my path. I just don't want to be one of those people who are rigid. I don't want to be one of those people who are I just don't want to be one of those people who are like, I'm walking a spiritual path. Like, that doesn't feel right. I feel so much more free. And that's really how I had been navigating personally. I'm always like, well, I'm on this spiritual path. Well, everyone's on this spiritual path. Everyone is on a divine path. So I really won't be using that terminology much anymore. I mean, maybe I'll evolve, but that's the point of it all, that evolutionary thing. But like I was saying, I did get to have a very transparent moment with God, transparent moment with myself, in that I didn't really know who I was outside of the spiritual path and how I should be. I mean, obviously I kind of did, because I was able to gain a better understanding, but I think that even just coming to this acknowledgement of my just innate, inherent divinity just allowed me to better understand like how me as just a regular being, a navigating being from birth, with my own, like, you know, authentic expression of self, am just naturally, inherently divine. It just allowed me to kind of gain that deeper level understanding about myself, and just that overall acceptance, not only of myself, but of the divine. And there was just so much that went into that moment, guys. Like, I want to explain it all, but I don't want to get too, you know, just have too many topics going on in this video. But yeah, I just was able to have a very transparent moment with God, and it was all purpose. Like, God just wanted me to kind of come more into an understanding that works for me, rather than, you know, assimilating to an understanding that's taking the norm at this time. For me, it was very beneficial at a point in time to resonate with the spiritual path, but it no longer does. So I'm just glad to be where I am. And that's just kind of how I'm navigating. That's how it makes most sense to me. But yes, guys, that's random, but that's honestly why I am no longer resonating. That's why I'm no longer claiming the spiritual path, because that's not mine. That's not how I resonate with my experience here on earth. That's not how I resonate with, you know, being connected to my creator. So I wonder if this, you know, resonates with you guys a little bit, if you kind of feel similar. But yeah, I definitely was really restricting myself with those notions of spiritual path and stuff like that. And now I just feel more free to just be however I am, and like really just see everything I do as divine, which is that's the point of it all, right? I feel like this connotation of being on a spiritual path gives you this idea that if you are ever to veer from what you feel you should be, like emphasis on the should be part, because if you feel that you're supposed to be in a place, then that's different. But it really puts this emphasis on where you feel you should be, and to venture from that feels almost like you're doing the wrong thing. And that's what was problematic for me personally. And it also was giving me this, you know, connotation of how God was supposed to be. But if I'm able to be more authentic, it also makes me feel like God is able to like react to me in a more authentic way, if that makes sense. Like I said, there's so much. I feel like a lot of messages are kind of coming out right now. But yeah, I really hope this resonated with someone. I hope that someone was able to take this message and, you know, find it useful for however you're navigating right now. I know that a lot of people decide to come away from the spiritual path because of their own reasons. That's nothing but knowns to me. So I really like the idea of just kind of giving a different connotation of why I personally have walked away from the notion of a spiritual path, and I'm just instead deciding to be a divine being by nature, by day, by night, by moment. Okay, there is no path for me to walk. It's just a moment to moment sense of being. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.